Thank you all for joining MOBE Mondays. In honor of those that we've lost, we'd like to take a moment of silence. Memoriam, John Thompson, Chadwick Boseman, Cliff Robinson, and certainly all of the styles of Miles Davis. Welcome to MOBE Monday.
Good evening. My name is Yvette Moyo. Thank you for joining us. Tonight we have a wonderful presentation of an iconic figure that launched the careers of many. One of the most creative in the past 100 years when it comes to music creation, innovation, jazz, style, and cool itself. I'm Yvette Moyo, and I'm the founder of MOBE, Marketing Opportunities in Business and Entertainment. Our purpose is to build an opportunity for our Black culture to be promoted and enjoyed by everyone, but also to monetize the opportunities for us to collaborate and to own our legacy. So tonight I'm extremely excited as someone who Real Men Charities presents MOBE, which is a nonprofit. And we actually purchased an entertainment venue in Chicago called The Quarry. And one of the joys of our life is Friday nights jazz at The Quarry. And we don't do that anymore. But when we open all the way after this COVID pandemic, which actually launched MOBE Mondays, we'll continue to celebrate and invite you all to join us. MOBE, well, I won't go into the history of MOBE. I'm sort of moved by the recent losses. The people that we presented tonight or just gave a moment of recognition to. And so I'm not going to say much about our legacy, but it is about tonight. I'm just going to hand it over to our moderator. But I do want to say that I'm so happy that each of you has joined us. This is really a spectacular lineup. And we are very much looking forward to this presentation. So I'm going to just hand it right over. If you want to know more about MOBE, it's mobesymposium.com. And of course, our Facebook is live. And if any of you guys would like to live stream, go right ahead. Our moderator tonight is an iconic figure in his own right, Michael Stafford. And he has actually has been in the entertainment industry for a number of decades, not just, and he's really respected and made his mark on radio stations in cities like St. Louis and Houston, Los Angeles. He's handled A&R for Quincy Jones and the Quincy Jones Quest records, and has produced DVD content for Sony Pictures Home Entertainment and Warner Brothers Home Entertainment. And he's the author of Miles Style, the fashion of Miles Davis, and he's our moderator for tonight. I'm going to say good evening. I'll be back at the end of this session, but I'm so happy to present to you tonight's MOBE Monday, moderated by Michael Stratford himself. Michael?
Thank you, Yvette. It's an honor and a privilege to moderate what might be the first virtual symposium on Miles Davis. The discussion started as an extension of my book, Miles Style, the Fashion of Miles Davis. But given the broad reach of Miles throughout his life in all facets, it felt more appropriate to expand the scope of the conversation with this diverse but connected panel. So I'd like to do brief introductions for each of our participants and then jump into the dialogue so that we can maximize our time. Starting out, as the son of a jazz legend, Aaron Davis has been charged with the responsibility for overseeing, along with his sister Cheryl, cousin Vincent Wilbur Jr., and general manager Daryl Porter, the intellectual property that is Miles Davis. While Miles' music continues to enthrall audiences worldwide, Aaron carefully cultivates how the music and image of his father is marketed, promoted, and introduced. A musician himself, Aaron has written film scores, and he was part of a blues rock band called Bloodline. His favorite Miles Davis album is Bitches Brew. John Jackson is Senior Vice President and Head of A&R for Legacy Recordings, a division of Sony Music Entertainment. An accomplished musician himself, playing a variety of string instruments, John is also a member of the Jayhawks, an alt-country rock band. And he's also owner of the world's first Bachelor of Arts degree in rock and roll history from Indiana University. John works to enhance the musical legacy of countless artists, music icons, including Miles Davis. His favorite Miles Davis album is Sorcerer. Nicole London, producer of the documentary Miles Davis, Birth of the Cool. She's a filmmaker who looks at the African-American experience through the documentary lens. Nicole has produced various episodes of the American Masters television series, American Promise, a documentary chronicling the journey of two African-American families pursuing the American dream, and the Black Panthers, Vanguard of the Revolution, examining the rise and fall of that controversial civil rights organization. She was also an associate producer of one of my favorite documentaries of the last couple of years, Sammy Davis Jr., I Gotta Be Me. Her favorite Miles Davis album is Kind of Blue. I have to take a deep breath because this is long right here. Film composer, jazz composer, producer, arranger, multi-instrumentalist, Marcus Miller has worked with almost anyone you can think of, ranging from a memorable partnership with the immortal Luther Vandross, Herbie Hancock, Brian Ferry, David Sanborn, Chaka Khan, Eric Clapton, Aretha Franklin, Bill Withers, and Elton John, just to scratch the surface. Regarded as one of the most distinctive and accomplished bassists in any genre, the Grammy Award-winning artist had a vital and important partnership with Miles Davis. First as a player on several albums, starting with The Man with the Horn in 1981, then segueing to composer and producer for three of Miles's final albums, Tutu, Music from Siesta, and Amandala. His favorite Miles Davis album is Kind of Blue. Vincent Wilburn Jr. always wears hats or caps, probably because he wears so many hats and caps in real life. He's a drummer, a producer, a band leader, a podcast host, a nephew of Miles Davis, and along with his cousins Aaron and Cheryl, and general manager Daryl Porter, he helps run the Miles Davis estate, ensuring that Miles's likeness and music are properly represented and presented to the public. He also served as producer on the Don Cheadle directed film Miles Ahead and executive producer on the documentary Miles Davis, Birth of the Cool. He recently produced Rubber Band, a Miles Davis album featuring songs partially recorded in 1985 and completed under Vince's direction, featuring artists like Lettucey, Layla Hathaway, and others. His favorite Miles Davis album is You're Under Arrest. That is our panel, and welcome. So Miles Davis's music is timeless, and his perspectives on social justice are as well. As this photo from 1959 shows, Miles was also a victim of police brutality. Given the events of the last few months, and especially over the last week, I'd like to open with an example of how this quote from his autobiography that was made more than 30 years ago, unfortunately, remains as timely today as it was then, and I'd like to get your responses from it. Quote, I know people get tired of hearing it, but Black people have got to keep saying it, throwing our conditions up into these people's faces until something is done about the way they've treated us. We've just got to keep it in front of their eyes and their ears like the Jews have done. We've got to make them know and understand just how evil the things are that they did to us over all these years and are still doing to us today, unquote. So Vince, when you hear something like that, and you know that your uncle said it, and you look at where we are in 2020, what kind of resonance does that have for you?
Well, you know, Mike, thank you for having me here. Hello to everybody on the Zoom. It's racism is still prevalent. You know, we've come a long way, but we have a long way to go. You know, and I've encountered brutality and growing up in the South Side of Chicago with the police. I was talking to Daryl Jones last week, and he said that he mentioned when Uncle Miles was 14, he and his buddy saw a kid hanging from a tree, you know, and Uncle Mouse was 14. So, and then Marcus kind of commented on it. You know, he never forgot about that, you know, and he didn't bring it up much to me, but I could tell, you know, that he would sometimes, you know, think about it, you know, but not talk about it, but just, you know, think about, like, if we saw a police officer in Malibu or something, you know, and he was driving his Ferrari. But we you know, it's sad to say, but you know, what's going to change unless we vote?
Yeah. Nicole, when you were working on the film, how did you encounter that aspect of Miles's experience? You might be on mute.
Thank you for having me as well. If you all can hear me now?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's an incident I was familiar with, but I didn't realize how familiar it would be until we really started delving into the story for the film. And it is really striking, just, you know, how far we've come and yet how far we still have to go. We absolutely wanted to make sure that we included that incident in this film because people don't remember and don't recognize that fame and fortune doesn't protect you necessarily from police brutality and from racism. And we wanted to be able to kind of draw the line from history till now. And of course, obviously, we're still seeing that almost, you know, not daily, but it does happen on a daily basis. So we just wanted to especially be able to kind of underscore, not just for the older fans of Miles Davis, but for the younger people who kind of wanted to draw that parallel and see that Miles is still just as relevant, not just because of the music, but because of his experiences.
And John, Miles' album, You're Under Arrest. Interesting title, interesting theme. The package, Miles is dressed in all black against a red background holding a toy gun. When you think about Miles in terms of him as an artist and his cultural impact, and as well as his music, how does that play into your decisions in terms of how to move his music forward to a new audience?
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me. I think that when it comes to Miles's, you know, image, there is always a little bit of that sort of evil edge, you know, with just some of his album titles, some of his song titles, you know, that I think it attracts people in a certain way. He's sort of the dark prince of jazz, I think, as some people refer to him, because, you know, there is always that little bit of an undercurrent of mystery and sort of what could be, what else are we looking for? But, you know, bitches brew, that kind of thing. So I think that's one of the things that we play on is, you know, the image that he liked to put out there, and of course the style, you know, as you know well, and it's really when you take the music and you take the idea of somebody, and then you put it together with a campaign where you're talking about what someone's life was like at a certain time, and why they came up with the music that they did. You know, it's all part of it. And if we're talking about Miles, or if we're talking about, you know, Johnny Cash, or if we're talking about, you know, any of the other artists that we talk about, it's always the personality that comes shining through as well as the music. And Miles always had that little gleam in his eye, like he was thinking about something, you know, maybe bad.
So Marcus, as someone that played with him, produced him, composed with him, when you look at, I guess, what he went through as a younger artist to the time that you worked with him, what was your experience? Did you experience the Prince of Darkness? Did you experience somebody that held on to the past, or somebody that continually pushed forward?
Man, what's happening, everybody, first of all? But you can't really talk about Miles and choose a side, because he encompassed all the sides, man. Yeah, he could get dark, but he could also be hilarious. The incidents that happened to him when he was coming up in the South and actually in the North as well, he never forgot. He would bring them up at random moments in conversations, completely random. Like we're talking about music, and then all of a sudden he's talking about the cops, almost like it was a flashback. So, man, it really, really affected him. So at the same time, though, you never felt like he was held back by those memories. You know, he was always moving forward. You know, just like his music, just like his style, he was always moving forward. And I think he got a kick out of the fact that he was one of those guys who people had to fear. You know, I think he enjoyed striking fear in people's hearts just with his demeanor, especially white people. You know what I mean? So I think he got a kick out of that. But I think he encompassed it all, the hope and the sadness. But I think in the end, he was actually hoping that things would get better.
Yeah. So Nicole, there's a staggering amount of visual and audio material on Miles from almost every aspect of his life. Can you talk about how you guys chose, you know, what to use and how you decided what the storyline would be for the documentary, given that his life was so broad?
So yes, we had about, I'd have to say over 100,000 photos that we were dealing with for Miles. And that includes contact sheets from, I don't know, maybe 50 different photographers. We had this film has over an hour of footage alone. And kind of we had the book, we had the autobiography, and we had Aaron and Vince as resources, especially. And from there, we kind of, you know, Vince gave us a bunch of names of people to talk to. I spoke to Marcus Miller. I spoke to Aaron, of course. And then from there, we kind of compiled this master list. So I did maybe 150 phone interviews. And from that, we kind of pared down who we were going to speak to. And of course, we asked everyone that we spoke to if they had any pictures or anything like that. So having this like incredible wealth of, and of course, Sony was gracious enough to open their vaults to us, and myself and my associate producer Lauren Winbush went over there, and we pretty much brought back every photo they had, and from the interviews that we did, and we kind of constructed a story that way, because we did have a treatment that we started off with, which was immediately disregarded. We really went, and especially with Stanley being such a skilled interviewer, we really went with the stories that kind of emerged from the interviews themselves. And from that, we kind of drew a narrative, and to kind of tell that story, we used the autobiography itself to kind of support the interviews that we had kind of culled together. And so all of these different parts, it was all kind of like a quilt, if you will. We used all these different parts to kind of put this whole film together. And that's how you see what you do. We did a lot of research in Europe as well. So it's really kind of from every corner of the globe that we kind of fashioned this film. And, you know, we wanted to talk to the people that were closest to him and knew him in different ways from each other.
One of the things that really got me when I was working on my book, and it sounds like it's similar for you, everyone was happy to talk about Miles.
Yes.
and everybody seemed to have at least one amazing story, but generally many more amazing stories when they talked about Miles. And you could feel and see the warmth that everyone still has for him when they talked about him. Was that your experience?
That was absolutely our experience. Even the people that had, you know, tougher stories to tell about Miles, especially the women in his life. But they all came forward with such a warmth and such a fondness for their memories with Miles. They absolutely took Miles as he was, as as a full human being, all the good and all the bad. And they were very honest. All the women, everybody we spoke to, they had such love for the man, but also such an honesty in the stories they told. And that's how we were able to make the film that we were able to make, because no one held back. And we really were able to kind of put forward as much of the true picture as we could.
Aaron just joined us. Hello, Mr. Davis. How are you? I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I'm late. Had to talk to the doctor. How you guys doing?
Oh, good. So, what is this like for you? You are running your father's estate with Vince and Cheryl and Daryl. He's a musical icon, but he's still your father. So how do you reconcile the two?
Well, I don't know. It's just, to me, he's just the chief. I mean, yeah, he's my father. He's, anybody on this panel can tell you what his legacy is, musically, artistically, fashion, but to me, it was more than just having a dad. It was like chief, this is chief. Chief is, he's omnipresent. He's again, everything I do music. I think about him. I get dressed, to go to the Image Awards or something. I think about him. I think about. I got this picture right here. So to me, it's just a pleasure to work on his stuff. I remember when they were recording Tutu and I got to be there, Marcus, you probably don't remember, on the session when Michael Breniak played this violin on Don't Lose Your Mind. Like, to me, those kind of things, like, I just, I'll never be able to forget. I won't ever want to forget them, but, just being there and then seeing how these records, some of the records were made, and, like, discussing with historians and archivists and guys like John and Steve Berkowitz and all these different guys about, the history of his music, the stuff that I wasn't around for. It's been nothing but a pleasure. I can't imagine having a better job, to go and dig deep and like, oh, we're going to work through some Miles and Bird, or we're going to work through some Miles and Train, or we're going to, or, Marcus's stuff with Miles. It's just a pleasure. It's just a pleasure. And then, we try to keep him, current. We try to do merchandise things. We try to, we've done our movies and stuff. So for me, it's just a pleasure. It's an absolute pleasure.
Well, that's. I guess this is for you, John, and Vince. What do you look for when you're considering new products to add to, the Miles legacy? It's obvious that you guys are very particular about the type of products that you associate his name with, and the level of quality stays at a very high standard. But what do you guys look at? How do you determine what would be a good fit for the brand?
Well, a lot of it has to do with, natural hooks, anniversaries, that kind of thing. So when we're talking about, the 50th anniversary of Jack Johnson this year, or the 50th anniversary of Bitches Brew last year, those things sort of spark conversations. And then the other thing is, music that people haven't heard before. It's easy to keep going back to the classics and reminding people about Kind of Blue and stuff like that. But, coming out with a concert, maybe that Vince and Marcus played on that no one's heard before, and maybe there's some video, and maybe there's some, backstage photos, and maybe those guys have some cool stories about it, or, so you sort of start with a wide net, and then you kind of narrow as you go in. And a lot of the stuff, speaks to you because other people are excited about it. When Vince gets excited about something, it's like, oh, well, there's a lead. Let's follow this path now for a while. And then, and we talk multiple times a week, and then we finally get to the one thing that we're going to do this year. So it's a constant conversation, and it's always in motion to dig and experiment and do things, or remix, or add some things, or find some gems maybe that no one's heard, and that, you know, the guys can finish up like they did with the Rubber Band, or they did with the Hail to the Real Chief track on the Birth of the Cool soundtrack. So it's always different, but the key is we're always thinking about Miles and guys like Miles in the catalog. So that's really the key, is always thinking about it and just following every lead we can.
Vince, any thoughts?
Thank God John's a musician, because by him being a musician, he knows the plight. He knows he has a love and a passion for music, you know. And so when Aaron and I have an idea, or Aaron, John, and I, or we as a collective, we push it forward. John green lights it, and it's on. You know, we never get any pushback from Legacy and the suits. John, I don't see you with a suit on, but you know, but it's a lot of
Barely
love.
have a
You know,
collared shirt.
and I gotta say, Aaron and I are always trying to think of ways to push the music. You know, even with Hail to the Real Chief, Marcus, we called you like it was Bernard writing all of us on a Zoom, not a Zoom, but a quick text. And Marcus was like, send the track. Stanley dug it and put it on the soundtrack, you know. But that's just the way it works, you know. John, you were being nice. You say once a week. I call you like every 2-3 days. We take Aaron and I talk almost, you know, 2-3 times a day. Nicole, I was blowing her phone up. Marcus, I blow his phone up, you know, because we just it's family, you know. And we're always trying to think of ways to keep the music, you know, keep the music moving, as Uncle Miles would, evolve, you know, evolution. Marcus, you don't even play tutu the same way with your band.
No,
you know,
man, we've been playing it for 30 years.
You put another spin on it, you know.
Oh, thanks for making me come up with that number, Vince. There's no way, you know, you can play a song that you wrote for Miles and continue to play it the same way.
Yeah.
You know, there'd be lightning bolts coming and hit you on the stage, you know.
Right. He teaches us to change.
Yeah.
You know? Still.
Well, along that line, Marcus, I think you're a great example of how Miles continued to look forward and be interested in what was to come and not get bogged down with what came before him. The 3 albums that you produced, you know, I think arguably they were ahead of their time, and it seems like they're more appreciated now than they were when they initially came out. Can you talk about just the creative thought process in terms of how you approach your collaborations with him? And what do you think he wanted to achieve at that point in his career?
Well, I think that he wanted to do something different. I'm not sure he had a real specific idea of what he wanted to do different. I think he was just leaving that up to some young cats to present him with something that he could get he could sink his teeth into. My vibe with Miles, with Tutu, was imagine him with his horn walking down Lenox Avenue in 1985, you know, and trying to negotiate this whole new world, because, you know, technology was really starting to play a massive role in music. You know, how's he going to do that, you know? So I had this music, you know, I wrote like 3 songs, Tutu, another one called Portia, and another one called Splash. And I presented it to him, you know, and he said, oh, I love it. Let me know when you want me to add trumpet to it. I mean, like it didn't take him like a 15 minutes to digest it. He said, oh yeah, that sounds great. Let me know when you need trumpet. So I got him to the studio, and I'm going, okay, Miles, this is kind of different. So you might want to know what key we're in, or you might want to know the chord changes. He didn't ask me any of that. It's like, this makes perfect sense to me. And he just started playing, you know? And I didn't realize how incredible that was until I did Tutu Revisited, maybe 20 years after, right? I got a bunch of young musicians, incredible musicians. Christian Scott played trumpet. Sean Jones played trumpet for a while. And they had questions. And that's when it occurred to me, Miles never asked me these questions. And these are legitimate questions. Like, what's the chord changes? You know, it never, it never came out of his mouth. You know, he never asked about the details. I would write the melodies out for him, you know, and I would tell him where I wanted him to play, which was very intimidating at first, giving somebody named the chief, giving the chief direction. But I finally got up the nerve to tell him where I wanted to go. But he was just playing, and he just reacted to what he heard. He had headphones on. I never played him the music beforehand. I would just put the headphones on and tell the engineer to press play, and then he would just react. And I had a lot of like crazy sound effects, and he would duck sometimes because it felt like an airplane was coming to hit him or something. Duck out of the way, and then he'd continue to play. Okay, so then, you know, the record came out, and you know, some people loved it, some people hated it, and there's a lot of controversy around it. And it was exactly what we were hoping for a Miles Davis record. You know what I mean? And Miles, I walked into his apartment on the Upper East Side after the record was out for a while. And I walked in the door and he said, "Man, thank you, man. You brought me back." You know, I'm saying, well, you know, some people hate it, some people love it. He said, exactly. You know what I mean? Like that's what it's all about, pushing it and making people have to be a little uncomfortable. But now, man, they got college courses specifically on that album. You know what I mean? So it's crazy that something that was kind of like, especially in the United States and Europe, they loved it from the beginning. The U.S. people didn't quite know how to accept it. But to see how time affects music, you see that Miles has been doing that his whole life. You know what I mean? Bitches Brew, you know, I think, was it Aaron who said that's his favorite album now? You know what I mean? And some people didn't get that. So Miles just had a way of, you know, pushing and forcing you to keep up. Matter of fact, somebody told him, I think, "Man, you know, I love what you did in the 50s and the 60s, but I can't get into what you're doing now, Miles. It just doesn't make sense for me." And Miles said, "Well, you want me to wait for you?" So there you go.
Yeah. Nicole, women in Miles is a sensitive subject. He was involved with a wide range of women throughout his life. He admitted to being emotionally and abusive physically at times and regretted it. While it's never been appropriate, that type of behavior is condemned now more than ever before. Where do you think that places Miles in the current conversation, and how did you decide to deal with it in the film? I mean, I dealt with it in my book because I felt like to not acknowledge it would be to not really be honest, but at the same time, I didn't feel like, and I don't feel like that's the whole picture of the man, and it shouldn't, that brush shouldn't be painted as the whole picture of the man.
Right. We had that same kind of, you know, balancing act to do for the film. It's something we never were going to shy away from. But we you know, we had to include it and kind of, you know, treat it with sensitivity, but also be treated with honesty. I mean, it's part of his life, and it's part of almost every relationship with women that he had. But you know, we kind of, and in a lot of ways, we took our cue from the women themselves. They were very matter of fact about their relationships with Miles and how they could still have a tremendous love and respect for the man, you know, even while, you know, condemning the things that he's done to them. They themselves understood that you have to take the entire person, the entire artist in complete context, as opposed to just, it can't just be a treatise on, you know, Miles and abusive relationships to women. That's certainly not the entirety of his life and career and his impact and contributions to music and to our culture in general. So we really kind of took our lead from the women themselves, who were so honest and, you know, open with us. And we especially looked at Frances Taylor Davis, who was his first wife, and with him the longest and had the most experience with him. And over several, I guess you could say, several periods of his musical development. And her story is really kind of not just her story, but also an amalgam of a lot of the women that he had relationships with. And, you know, we kind of summed it up with her, she has this beautiful quote at the end: "I don't forget, I don't regret, but I don't forget, but I still love." And that was the, I guess you could say, the part of the charm of Miles Davis, that he kind of transcended all of it. You know, all of it. It's all, you have to take all of it in context, and you kind of, you know, you can't just have. It's not a. You can't take Miles Davis in a vacuum.
Right.
You have to have it all. And so we tried to present that.
Yeah, I think you did a great job, and to have an opportunity to spend some time with Frances was a real treat.
Oh my
She was just a delight.
She was amazing. She was every bit as vibrant and funny as she came across in the film. And we're so sorry that she never was able. Didn't live to see the film come out. But we're able to kind of, like, as I said, we had thousands of photos of Frances that we'd found, many of which she'd never seen or hadn't seen since the 50s or 60s when she was still dancing. And we sent her a huge binder. Vince saw her at our, she had to just have a brief stay at a nursing home before she passed. And so we sent her this big book. And she'd always used to talk about how beautiful her legs were. We included that in the film. And when she called us up when she got the book, the binder of photos of herself. And she was like, you know, people never believe me when I tell them, and now you sent me this beautiful book, and I thank you so much. But I tell you, my legs don't look the same. She was still concerned about how her legs weren't as because she was showing them up until the end. She was
excited.
So amazing, and my hero in so many ways.
Hey, Mike, and then she had me call John to get some Someday My Prince Will Come, some albums, so she could pass out at
That's right.
at the home. Remember, John?
Oh yeah.
John, you sent her a box.
That's right.
She was so proud, and Nicole, she was so proud of that book too. That binder.
Oh, it was lovely. We were so lucky to found all the behind the scenes photos of Someday My Prince Will Come at Sony. We gasped when we saw them because it was something that we didn't anticipate on finding. And so we used almost every photo we had just to kind of create that. It's like we created like just a really lovely sequence around Frances and the filming of that album cover. That was not going to be included in the film at all before, you know, because we were going to mention that he made a point to include Black women on his album covers, but without Frances and those photos, we couldn't go into that story and really kind of humanize their relationship in that way. So.
And when I was interviewing her, we were having one conversation, and I'd asked her a question, and she started answering it, and then she stopped. She said, "You know what, Michael? Here's the bottom line. He just couldn't handle all this." And that was Frances. So, Aaron, Vince, what is the goal of the Miles Davis estate?
The goal? Well, I mean, the goal
What's
is
the mandate?
We represent him. We try to keep his image and likeness out there for people to see. We try to develop new fans. We try to cater to our old fans too. You know, we just everything. We're just involved with everything Miles, whether that's new music or old music, or you know, Zoom calls, Zoom symposiums.
So this is for everybody. There are a number of larger-than-life jazz musicians like Bird, Duke Ellington, Coltrane, Satchmo. What is it about Miles, unlike any other jazz musician, how has he transcended his art to the extent that he occupies such a critical and important place in the culture beyond just his music? I mean, people don't talk about how Yardbird dressed. Nobody talks about Duke Ellington being a great cook. Nobody talks about Satchmo as a painter. You know, nobody talks about Coltrane taking incredible photos in the 50s and 60s when he looked like a model. I mean, Miles was all of that. But what do you think it is about him that has just transcended his art form.
I think you said it, man, because people are captivated by compelling style. And Miles had style in the way he played the trumpet, but he had style in the way he stood at the microphone on the bandstand. He had style in the way he dressed. He had style in the way he painted. I mean, everything he did was so distinctive, right? And you mentioned earlier his album covers. I mean, just his album covers alone were, you know, he had the kind of album covers where if you know how when you were a kid, you looked at the album cover to decide whether you were going to like the music or not, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And if you see the album cover of The Big Fun or Bitches Brew, oh, I like this album. You don't even know what it's going to be, but they were so compelling. He had black women through the 60s when people weren't doing that. I mean, they literally used to put white women on the cover of a black jazz musician's album just to make sure the audience was larger, right? And Miles said, no. Okay, so he created a whole thing about the way he presented his music. Okay, forget about his dress. And his style was, it changed like his music. I remember, because I joined the band in '81, and he had just been in retirement for like 5 years. He hadn't played a note in public for at least that long, right? So I remember being in his house, hanging out after rehearsal. He said, you know, it was before a recording session, actually. We were getting ready to go to the studio. And he said, go in my closet and find me something to wear, right? So I go in his closet, and it's all these bad clothes from 1973, right? Bell bottom this and fringe that, all sorts of like clothes from the era before he went to retirement. And I said, Miles, you can't wear nothing in here. You Miles Davis, you can't wear anything in this closet. But he said, no, I'll figure it out. And he went and put on like 3 outfits at the same time and somehow made it work. But within 6 months of him coming out of retirement, he had a whole new wardrobe. He was a whole new guy, you know what I mean? Because he hated wearing clothes from a different era. He hated playing notes from a different era. He was always looking forward. So I think that's just compelling. And plus the darkness thing, you know what I mean? He was always mysterious and people were like afraid to approach him. And, you know, it just made for a really compelling figure.
Yeah. We had we'd spoken to a number of Japanese, we couldn't include it in the film, but we spoke to a number of Japanese designers too. He was one of the first, especially in the 80s, to embrace Japanese fashion. He even walked in a fashion show, I think in Japan. Yeah, he was just always changing. And I think that's what kept him and keeps him relevant. That there's if any conversation that you could have about music or style or cars, or you know, he had style even in the way he spoke. Miles Davis is part of every conversation, and I think that's what keeps him. You know, we're always going to be able to talk about Miles Davis because he changed so often, because he was always at the front of any game. And I think we're still going to be talking about Miles Davis, whatever next music comes next, because he probably has touched on it.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he changed music 3 times at least, you know, the course of modern music, and, you know, the fact that he embraced electric music when he did and got into the rock and roll scene and, you know, was rubbing elbows with Sly and Hendrix, and, you know, it just, he captures your imagination in a different way. You know, I personally, I love Duke Ellington. He's one of my favorite, you know, composers, but he didn't have a yellow Ferrari, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like,
Or a red one.
or a red one. And, you know, so it's the character in addition to the great music, you know, that draw people in and make people really curious, you know, and then you can give them the music and say, oh, he was also an amazing player, and he also wrote these wonderful songs, and he also, you know, collaborated with all these great people, and, you know, took direction when he worked with you know, Wayne Shorter or Marcus or whomever, and, you know, was able to be the leader or, you know, work with people. And So he kind of is just everything to everybody if you let him be. And that's what all we're trying to do, is just get that message to people.
Hey, Mike,
Yep.
I've never seen anyone change clothes 6 times a day. I mean, just trying on new, different, hooking up different outfits. You know, you look around, he'd have something else on. You know, when I was living with he and Aaron out in Malibu, that was his thing. Just that's where his mind worked.
Hey Vince, hey Vince, I would go to, he'd say, come over, because they just sent me some new clothes.
Uh-huh.
And I can't tell what I look like when I'm wearing them, so you're going to put them on, and I'm going to decide whether I like them or not.
Yeah, right.
So he and his lady friend would sit on the couch, and I put on whatever the crazy stuff they sent him.
Uh-huh.
And then I stand there and walk around like I was Miles Davis. He said, I don't like that. You keep it.
Right. Or if he gave you something and the jacket looked better on you, he'd ask for it back. He said,
yeah, then he'd take it back.
Right, give it back.
Is that what he called auditions, Marcus?
Yeah, man, he was auditioning the clothes, man, and it was crazy,
Yeah.
When I was working on the book, I had a chance to, talk to a lot of people, and Vince was invaluable in connecting me with a lot of folks. And like I said, everyone had really good stories to tell, but there were always some words of wisdom that Miles would impart. And I was wondering if, those of you that dealt with Miles could offer anything that kind of comes to mind in terms of things that he said to you that really had an impact and stuck.
Man, so many.
Yeah, I've got some, but I can't tell you those, man.
Hey, right now, Michael, we're all filtering.
Yeah, I'm like, what can I say? I mean, but one thing I always thought of, I think of when I think of him is, is am I doing this like the best I can do this, whatever it is? Am I really doing this the best I can do this? Especially when I'm working on music or something, I'm just like, man, am I giving up on this, or am I like, am I giving this the best? Is this the best I'm gonna put forward? Those are the kind of things that I remember from him. And he would look at sometimes he would kind of see me doing homework or something, and he would look over and be like, is that what you're gonna really turn in? Like, just like there's a level of I wouldn't say it's like a level of excellence or anything, but there's a level of effort that needs to be put forth in things, whether you're getting dressed for something or whether you're working on some tracks or whatever it is, and I always feel that when that's not, when you can tell, like in a band or something, when that level hasn't, they haven't put forth that much effort, they haven't really thought about it, or they haven't, so for me, that's the kind of thing that I take away from him.
For me, go on, Vince, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Marcus. I'll come after you.
I was just gonna say, he said a lot of things, but I think the biggest thing I learned was just watching. Like your parents, they talk a lot, but you really learn from observing them. And he was just so good at being himself. I mean, he didn't drive the yellow Ferrari because he thought he should be driving the yellow Ferrari. He drove one because he liked driving yellow Ferraris, and he truly liked changing his music. He was totally 100% himself. So I think a lot of musicians who admire him, we go through a period where we try to emulate him, right? But luckily for me, that period for me was short, because seeing him, you realize, no, he's just being the hell out of Miles, and I got to figure out who Marcus is and be the hell out of Marcus. You know what I mean? I think that was the biggest thing. Be the best version of yourself. Figure out who you are, and then be the best version of that.
Yeah. To be fearless, Mike. To not look back. I mean, something as trivial. Well, it's not trivial, but something. We were on a flight once, and we were, the first course was soup. And he told me, he said, whenever you have soup, take the spoon away from the bowl. And I'm like, shit, I didn't even know about, I just ate soup, and, scoop it up and hit it in your mouth, but He just said, he guided me, took my hand and said, away from this bowl and into your mouth. Something that, you know what I mean? I'm like, damn, see? And when we were going on stage, you know, he would look at us, Aaron, Marcus, you know, he would give you the once over, you know, and if he didn't dig what you had on, you know, hit it, go back to the dressing room and change, because it was about the appearance, but the music was first, you know what I mean? But it all encompasses the look. You better be able to play the music that you're playing that night. You better play it well, you know, else they'll get after the show. But it was like all of that. You know, I heard that people used to just come to the concert if it was a club just to see what Miles was driving, because he'd park his car right in front of the club, then what he had on, and then we got to hear the band. You know, we got to see who's in the band. We got to see what they have on. You know, how they sound. You know, but it was like whatever he did. He would cook like the most amazing meals when I was living with Aaron in it. You know, anything he set out to do. You know, it was like it had to, like Marcus said, it had to rub off on us because, you know, we wanted to be that. You know, we wanted to he brought us our inner self out. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? You know, you got to find your identity. I could walk you through. I call it Miles Davis University. I can, you know, bring you through the university, but once you graduate, then you got to have your own sound, your own, you know, where you want to wear Nike stuff on stage, go ahead. But I wouldn't wear Nike stuff on stage. And he made me take it off. You know, he said I look like a walking billboard. You know, and I never forgot that. You know, I mean, and I don't have anything against Nike, but I don't wear it on stage. You know what I mean? Little things. You know, don't cut your hair. He used to say that. I was like, damn. You know,
he told Train, don't fix the missing tooth in the front of his mouth.
Did he tell you about the times when they would go and if the cat didn't set his drums up nice, they would leave? Just setting the drums up, Mike, not listening to the cat if he could play or not. He said, man, if the drums were like, we'd leave, we cut out, you know.
So we got a couple questions. Robert wants to know, the album on the corner seems to be rising in stature over the years. Can anyone speak about why this might be happening? The box set is awesome.
Probably because nobody got it when it came out. I mean, a lot of people dug it when it came out, but I think, you know, when you look back on it now, you're like, wow, there's a lot of stuff in there that's pretty prevalent now, you know.
Yeah, people caught up to it.
Yeah, I think they finally, he didn't want to wait for him, but they finally caught up to him.
I think Miles and to a certain extent Train have made critics a little bit more careful. You know what I mean? Because they've seen what happened to the critics who talked bad about the way John Coltrane played in the late 50s and in the 60s. You know, now he's like a god, and they still have copies of your criticism of John Coltrane. So, yeah, you know what I mean? You know, and people are publishing, they have books of critics who were just wrong as they could be. And I think Miles, critics are more careful these days because they saw that story. They saw how Miles made those albums in the 70s that they thought was trash. And now there's a whole generation of people, whole generation of music lovers who just revere those albums. So it's made everybody think a little bit.
I also think just the way that Legacy has been putting these packages together, you know, when the albums are re-released, they're enhanced with so much supplemental material, and the way that they're, I guess, remixed or re-engineered, you know, the fidelity is amazing. I mean, they aren't just thrown out as, you know, just a reissue. I mean, each of these Miles Davis records is set up as an event, each of these re-releases. And I think that amount of attention and care causes people to look at the music a little closer and maybe take it more seriously than they did initially.
And that's thanks to the whole team. We got a team of people, you know, Michael Kuskuna and Richard Seidel and Steve Berkowitz and the late great Seth Rothstein, who put all those box sets together, and Mark Wilder, who masters everything, you know. I mean, it's a whole team of people that are just constantly looking through stuff and, you know, making notes and putting stuff to the side and saying like, you know, there's a bunch of stuff from the 80s that we should really look at. And here's, you know, we'll keep finding stuff and keep going through it and keep doing mixes of, you know, tapes and stuff. And we'll get there, you know, but it's thanks to the tireless work of a lot of people, including many people on this call that these things make their way to the surface and we can hear them all.
Got a question from Greg. Tell me what inspired you to write your book. Just fascination with Miles. You know, I started off experiencing him via In a Silent Way on an 8-track tape in my father's car. And I couldn't get into the album. He freaked me out on the cover because he looked like he was a vampire. He just looked mad. But years later, when I was in my early radio career and I was doing an overnight jazz show, even though I knew nothing about jazz at the time, I came across the My Funny Valentine album, which was the first time I ever heard acoustic Miles. It was a live album. And he had a blue jacket on with a polka dot tie and a white shirt. And he just looked night and day from the other guy that I remembered as a kid. And that kind of got me into his music. And as I got into the music, I got into the man, because there are more than 24 books that have been written on Miles. And the one thing that always came up but was never really expounded on was his sense of style. And over the years, I saw these amazing photos of him taken by photographers like Jim Marshall and William Claxton and Tom Palumbo and Dennis Stock. I mean, just incredible photos. And you see how this guy dressed, how he carried himself, and it just germinated. It just germinated over time until it turned into a book. And you know, thankfully, the estate was supportive of the effort and really helped connect me with a number of people that were happy to talk about Miles. And here we are today, and I'm really pleased and grateful to be able to add something to the Miles Davis library, no matter how small it might be. I think we're close to winding down, but I think we've got a couple more minutes. And had a question for everybody. You know, Miles was ahead of his time musically. He was ahead of his time as a person. He was, particularly during the days when he was getting his notoriety, he did not back down or apologize for being a successful Black man. He never backed down from insisting on being acknowledged and accepted as a complete human being. How do you think he'd feel right now about the current climate of civil rights and Black Lives Matter? Where do you think he would be with all that's going on right now?
I probably think he'd be where the rest of us are, where we're just, you know, we're seeing what's going on, and we're trying to, you know, one time we're trying to process what's happening, and, you know, everybody has families, and we're all, you know, concerned, and, you know, I mean, we used to drive around Malibu, and you know, we get pulled over once in a while, and he'd be like, all right, you know, he'd be, depending on what kind of mood he was in, you know, he'd be like, either like, oh, this guy better not mess with me, or, you know, or Aaron, just don't say anything, just chill out. Because, you know, if I was like hyper or whatever, you know, whatever I was doing, but you know, I think he would be just where we all are, you know. But yeah, like you said, he never apologized for being successful. I mean, his father was successful, so you know, he knew what it was to be Black and successful even before he became successful on his own. So I think he'd be where the rest of us are, you know, trying to work through and get to the next level, you know?
Yeah. He might have, you know, because that what's going on now would definitely trigger the stuff that happened to him before. And I could imagine imagine what Public Enemy would sound like today. I could imagine him, like if I was gonna try to create something for him, I would want to create something like really challenging and angry and see if it matched where I believe he would be. You know what I mean? He might say that's crazy, but I think because he's been through this one time, okay, and because we all thought, like in the mid 70s, you know, we all thinking, okay, well, we just came out of civil rights. I think things are getting better. You know what I mean? And to see them, I don't know if it took a turn for the worse or it just a bunch of rocks got unturned, you know, but to see where it is now, I think he might want to say something pretty strong.
Vince, anything?
I could see the album cover. I could hear the music. I could hear the anger. I could hear the muted trumpet. It would probably be a masterpiece, like Kind of Blue, you know. Really.
Okay. So last question, are there any upcoming Miles Davis projects that you can talk about? John, Aaron, Vince, Nicole, Marcus?
I'll let Vince tell you, but there's stuff. Yeah, like we got some stuff coming for the 50th anniversary of Jack Johnson. Like I said, there's some more stuff coming from, you know, the project that Vince was doing in the studio that yielded Hail to the Real Chief. There's definitely something with all this, you know, hours and hours and hours of music from the early 80s, you know, from that You're Under Arrest period, and surrounding. So there's a lot of stuff that we're still working on. But like I said, we're always having this conversation, and, you know, every year it yields a couple of things, but, you know, it's a constant thing that we're doing.
Got it. Nicole, you've done a lot of television, and as good as Birth of the Cool was, there's still a lot that was left out. Could you envision possibly a documentary miniseries on Miles?
I know that there's another project that's being worked on. I think more narrative as opposed to documentary. But from the material just that we put together, there was easily enough for a 6-part, you know, a la The Last Dance, you know, kind of treatment of Miles Davis. You know, obviously because he changed music so many times, there was so much that we had to leave out. We know we couldn't even talk about Miles in Japan. We couldn't talk about Miles. We can only touch on like Miles and his cooking. There's probably room for a cookbook. You know, there's so much about Miles Davis. There's enough for several books on his fashion and the cars, just the style in general. So there's so much more. I personally am moving on to different projects, but I would like anybody call me if you need another producer for another Miles film, because I am here and I have the knowledge, and there's so much more to be mined about the man and his music and just everything about him.
Vince, Aaron, anything before we wrap this up?
Well, just keep checking our website. We do a lot of new merchandise offerings throughout the year. And then also, like, speaking of what John Jackson was talking about, we checked our website. We got, you know, that's where all the news that's Miles get on our mailing list, you know, and follow us on the socials. Follow the Miles Instagram page, you know, follow the Twitter page, and definitely the Facebook. You know, we got tons of stuff coming down the pike. You know, the pandemic has changed the landscape of a few things, but, you know, the music is still there, man. So we'll be there.
Great. Well, we certainly appreciate everyone for participating, your time, your interest, your passion for Miles Davis. And MOBE Mondays, thank you so much for hosting us. And maybe we'll do something like this again.
We would love to do something like this again. I'm Yvette Moyo, the co-founder of MOBE, the Marketing Opportunities in Business and Entertainment series, and COVID actually birthed this MOBE Monday series. And I just want to say that the kind of conversation that we so seldom get a chance to have, except in somebody's, you know, den or living room or bar or something, is a privilege to bring this kind of conversation to our MOBE audience. One, it is, we use the hashtag a lot. that legacy matters. And we cannot forget these things. We cannot forget that we're talking about 1957, talking about Miles being cool. Okay, the definition of cool. We talk about Obama and his swag. It's really the same thing. And so for the generation of people who may not know Miles like we do, then they go and buy something. They go get something. They grab something. They start a conversation, and it's about, you know, it's about adversity. It's about excellence. It's about being a father. And we're more than just a headline, right? Or more than just some title that they could have put on Miles. And, you know, definitely everybody would want that hoodie. Vincent, let me tell you, really. And what is the website? What is, well, milesdavis.com, of course.
Right.
So everybody go on down to milesdavis.com and really check out a legacy of someone who, man, showed us how to live in so many ways. I just think of, I want, as a Chicagoan, and MOBE is a Chicago-based national brand. You got the White Sox. You got the White
Southside
Sox hat. I just think I can't let this be over without mentioning Herbie Hancock, without mentioning Robert Irving III. You know, these are people who we relate to, that we look at them like icons when they walk past to say, that's the guy that played with Miles, you know, that's the guy that Miles, you know, he came from Chicago. Miles grabbed him at
Bobby and I played in a funk band together.
Well, okay, right. So it's so much more. So yeah, go ahead, Nicole. You know, let's come on with the next segments and the next segments and the next segments. And you know, and yeah, we should continue this. So it's a wonderful, it's a terrible tragedy, COVID, but that it brings us an opportunity to bring this kind of conversation, this kind of recognition that could live on with just a click of the recording of this Zoom session. It's really a pleasure to be part of that. Now, I'm going to also invite you guys to join us tomorrow, because tomorrow we have a special MOBE Tuesday. And that MOBE Tuesday is about the food industry and how much we spend as, and I'm now just touching my phone, and of course my notes went away. But we're talking about $1.3 trillion that Black people spend, that have disposable income, let's just say. And we over-index, that means we overspend on food because we're still cooking at home. While everybody else has the luxury of ordering things from wherever. That kind of stuff is expensive. But if you really are on a budget, you're cooking, you're still frying some chicken, and you're still going and buying your onions and green pepper and fresh garlic to make something wonderful. And so, but are we getting the return on that investment? And when we talk about marketing opportunities in business and entertainment, this is in the business of entertainment is that we continue to buy this merchandise. We continue to read the books. We continue to create the film so that we're not the Sun Times and we're not the New York Times. We can't let everything be a headline about what's so wrong with us, right? It has to be what's right with us. And then it has to be a how-to on how we spend our money. I don't care if you're Miles cooked, okay? So, you know, it really relates to everything, relates to us if we make it relate to us and the possibility of better. And so we have these people who are selling their products in grocery stores, and we don't know the Black products, right? We don't even know, like every day when we go to the grocery store, we could buy something Black, and that's like voting. That's like putting your money back into the community. So that's what tomorrow's going to be about, and it's to look at the future of Black people and in the consumer foods industry. And you know, for decades, brands like Uncle Ben's and Aunt Jemima have been making money. We don't have any stats on how much money our Black brands make, and there are some. So Nielsen has done a lot of research on where we spend our money, and tomorrow we'll hear from Allison Collins at Select Brands, who has an iconic brand, Mambo sauce, that's been in her family 50 years. And she's on the shelves, but we go and buy Kraft, right? Because it's the on sale barbecue sauce, and then hook it up with some other things to make it taste the way we want it to taste. When we could be hooking up Mambo. Maybe Mambo, you might not even have to hook it up, right?
Well, if you're from Chicago, you know about the Mambo sauce.
We know about the Mambo sauce and the Collins brothers. And the Collins brothers who own the grocery stores. Right. So that's where the sauce came from. And then there's Wiley Mullins, who does these these seasonings that make your greens taste like home cooked meals, right? Because greens are becoming a mystery to a certain generation of people, right? Black people, when you say we got some greens, they be like, where are they? But they act like it's mysterious. But his seasoning will make it taste like grandma's. And finally, Ron Damper is going to be on tomorrow from the Damron Corporation. He sells tea to guess who? McDonald's. His sweet tea is it, and he's Black. So, you know, when you feel guilty about drinking too much sweet tea, at least Ron is in the picture. At least you might not feel as guilty. But those are the kinds of things we're doing at MOBE. It's been a pleasure to introduce those of you who didn't know about MOBE before to what we've been doing. It's 28 years of really, really trying to, actually, because we could count $200 million in business that we ran through. People who met each other at MOBE were able to do the deals to build up their own businesses, but help product managers reach their goals and the corporation. So if we join together, collaboration works, we can make it happen and ring that cash register. So thank you all. I hope that the Miles Davis organization continues to grow, and for years and years, we're able to celebrate the 100th birthday of that cool, because our culture influences the world. Thank you very much for being here tonight. Hope to see you tomorrow. I know I talked too much, but it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. It was
Thanks, Mike.
great.
Thank you.